Good morning everybody, I'm Rick the pilot teacher and welcome to this beautiful location. Now the question is, how can you get one of these to a location like this when you don't even know where to begin? So in this video I'm going to tell you how you can go about becoming a helicopter pilot. All the steps you need to take to get from 0 hours to that first day at flight school. Hi, I'm Rick the pilot teacher and this video is all for you guys that are thinking about becoming a helicopter pilot. Where do you start? How do you even know which school to go to? Which country do you even train in? I've been through all this. I started to learn in the UK. I ended up going to do my training in the US and now here I am in Canada. So I've got a pretty good idea of what it takes to get from 0 hours to a helicopter pilot in different countries. So if that's what you're after, stick around for this video. So the first thing is basically you've got to decide what kind of pilot you want to be. Do you want to be just a helicopter pilot for recreation, buy your own helicopter, or become part of a flying club that has a helicopter and just fly recreationally? Or do you want to get a commercial pilot's license so that you can go off and be a professional pilot and earn money for your services? And depending on which one you want to do, depends on how far you go in flight school, but you all have to start with the private pilot certificate. That is the first certificate everybody has to get to be able to go and fly one of these. So for your private pilot certificate, there is kind of a couple of ways that you can go about getting the training to earn your private pilot certificate. One of them is if you're fortunate enough to be able to afford your own aircraft, you can purchase an aircraft, lease an aircraft, and then pay an instructor to come and teach you in your own aircraft, which is good for you because your hourly rates are a lot lower than paying for a school. So that's one way. You just have to make sure that your insurance company is aware that you are going to be training in your aircraft, because they'll probably jack your rates up until you've finished your training. So that's one way. Get your own aircraft or lease it, be part of a flying club, and have an instructor come and teach you in your own aircraft. For the rest of us, like myself, I wasn't fortunate enough to own my own aircraft, so that only leaves flight school. So there's quite a few things that you have to think about if you are going to be going to flight school, especially in a different country. So the rest of this video is all about if you want to be a commercial pilot, a commercial helicopter pilot flying every day. Now, it's not cheap. I'm telling you, I'm still paying for it now and I've been flying 20 years. So you decided you want to be a commercial helicopter pilot. You want to do this day in, day out. How do we get to that point? The first thing that you want to do before you spend any money on flying lessons is get your medical certificate. This goes for private, commercial, if you want to get your ATP. If you are training in the US, the private pilot certificate requires a third-class medical certificate. If you're going to be training for a commercial pilot certificate, you need at least a second-class medical certificate. And if you're going to be eventually going to get your ATP or airline transport pilot certificate, then you're going to need a first-class medical. So what I advise you to do is go and get a first-class medical, because that way you know that you are able to get any kind of flying license that you wish further in your career, unless you get health problems down the line. But try and go for a first class medical, because then you can fly everything. Get this before you fly any lessons, because if you go for a medical and they find something that's not quite right, like a heart murmur or yeah, any plethora of health issues that you didn't know about, they can basically deny you a medical certificate, and then your flying career has probably come to a halt. You may be able to get a third-class medical certificate and basically fly recreationally or for a private pilot certificate, but flying professionally may be off the cards. And there's nothing worse than going all the way through your training, getting to a point where you're ready to solo and you need that medical certificate, and you spent, I don't know, 10k already, and then you go for your medical and they're like, sorry. It's heartbreaking, and you'll have wasted a load of money. So get your medical certificate first. So if you're going to be a professional pilot, aim for the first class medical certificate. That's fine getting a medical certificate if you're currently living in the US, but how do you get a medical certificate if you're not living in the US but you want to train in the US? What I suggest you do is go and get the highest level medical certificate that you can in your country. That way then, if they find anything in your own country, you're not going to waste money trying to get over to the US for flight training. That's what I did when I first learned to fly. I did my private pilot certificate in the UK, and I went and got I think it's a first class, I can't remember, it's 20 years ago, but basically the equivalent of the highest medical that you can get in the UK. Once I got that, I knew that I was good for the US. So if you're planning to train in the US, go and get a medical certificate in your own country so that you get the thumbs up to know that when you get to the US, you're not going to find any underlying problems. Okay, so that's the medical certificate out of the way. You're good to go, healthy enough, you can fly, you can go and jump in one of these things, fly people around, get paid for it. So that's cool. So now you've got your medical. Now we need to look at where you want to train. So when I was going through selecting where I wanted to train, when I was doing my private pilot certificate, I was going to the flight school that was nearest to me where I was living, because at the time I still had to work whilst I did my private pilot certificate. It took me 2.5 years to get, because I could only fly one lesson every second Saturday, but that was just my circumstances. If you can, try and do all your training in one place from day one. Basically, this is college. You start and you go all the way through until you're finished. But you need to try and think of where you want to do it. When I was looking, I knew I didn't want to stay in the UK. So I looked at the US, Canada, South Africa, Australia. Those were my 4 countries that I was looking at when I wanted to go and do the rest of my training. So I looked into them all. I was looking at flight school, I was looking at visas, I was looking at where to stay, cost of living, how easy it was to get there, how far away it was. And basically I ended up narrowing it down to the US, just because I'd always wanted to go to the US, and for me it worked out that that was the better option. So once you decided on which country you want to train at, the next thing you have to do is to look to see if you can actually get to that country to train. So we're talking visas. Now, the US has got 2 visas. You can find that video either here or here. It's up at the top somewhere. I can't remember which side it is when I'm on this side of the camera. But I'll put a link to that up there so you can kind of see what visas you need to go to the US. And basically, you need a visa to go to a country and train, and if you want to work there, then you also need to make sure the visa that you get for that country allows you to work as well, because if you get the wrong visa and you can only train, then you're pooched because you can't work there. So look into the visas for each specific country that you want to look into, and once you've decided on the country that you want to train at, start the process for getting that visa. So to get that visa, you may kind of have to just put that bit on hold for a second, because you've now got to decide which flight school you're going to go to, and the visa and the flight school kind of work hand in hand. So you know you need a visa, you know which type of visa you need, so we're going to put that to the side. Now we're going to pick the flight school. Now this is really, really, really important. The flight school that you pick can determine if you are successful or not. Now, there are thousands of flight schools all over the world, and there's probably going to be hundreds of them in the country that you have selected that you want to train in. So the first thing you need to do is to look at the flight schools that can offer training to international students if you're international. If you are already living in the US, then you don't have to worry about that. Or if you're already living in Australia, Canada, South America, South Africa, wherever, if you're a national to that country, you don't have to worry about this. But if you are an international student, you need to make sure the school can train international students. Now, in the US, you've got Part 61 schools and you've got Part 141 schools, and the Part 141 will be able to do both, 141 and 61, and the Part 61 schools can't do Part 141. Basically, Part 141 means that they have developed an approved syllabus for training with the FAA, and they are accredited to offer the Part 141 training. Also with that is they've been usually approved to offer training to international students. So they're able to offer the training and the training and work visa. So the school that you pick is very important for that way. You pick the wrong school and you get the wrong visa, you could get to the border and this border guard's like, sorry bud, you ain't coming in. Or you basically finish your training and then they're like, see ya, thanks for your money, bye. So be very careful. Make sure you do your due diligence when you're picking a flight school. In the US, I think there's about, I want to say about a dozen to 15 flight schools that are approved for the Part 141 training and can offer the work and train visa. So have a look at those. I'll put a link in the description below of all the flight schools that I've found that can offer training to international students. So if you want to check that out, that will help you kind of get a heads up. But flight school selection is really, really important. Once you've narrowed it down to about 2 or 3, give them a call. Start researching all about those flight schools. Look on forums. Try and get in touch with students that are currently there to find out how the flight school is currently performing. You want to make sure that you can get as much research into that school as possible. The other thing you want to look at is how much is it going to cost you? What's the hourly rate for the machine with an instructor? Wet, so that means with fuel. What are the taxes? When I trained in Oregon, there's no sales tax, so there was no taxes that went on. But if I went to a flight school in Florida, there would have been taxes on that. So make sure you know exactly what it's going to cost you for each hour. Also, you want to make sure that the school offers accommodation, because if you are traveling either across the country or internationally, you need somewhere to stay. So does the school have housing? If they do, how far away is it? And how much is that per week, per month, whatever? The reason why I say how far away it is because especially if you are coming from overseas, you're not going to have a car. And when I got there, my accommodation was really close. It was like a 10-minute walk, so that was all right for me. But then when I had to go get groceries, I used to put on my big backpack, walk all the way to the grocery store, load it all up, and come back to my accommodation. Until one day, one of my students were like, why are you walking? I'm like, well, that's the only way I can get there. I don't have a car. I'm like, you're a moron. Why don't you get a bicycle? And I was like, what an idiot. I'd not ridden a bike in like 10, 15 years, so that was why I didn't even think about it. So something simple like that. How far away the accommodation is from the school, from the shops, everything else. Because, yeah, if you can't get a car, if you can't afford a car, then you're on your 2 feet. So, yeah, bicycle's a good idea. But just remember, get a bicycle. It's much easier than walking. So, flight school selection is really important. Check in the description below. I've got a link to a flight school comparison and budgeting spreadsheet, so you can put up to like 6 schools in there. You can put in the prices of all the pilot certificates. So if you want to do your instrument rating, your commercial certificate, your CFI, your CFII, all that kind of stuff, everything's in there, so you can put them all in and you can compare the schools side by side to help you narrow it down. Once you know which flight school that you want to go to, then you've got to get in touch with the admissions department for that school. At this point, this is where they will be able to help you with your visa application if you're an international student, or if you're a national, they'll be able to help you with all your details about getting registered with the school. So you got in touch with the school, Your visa application's been started if you're an international student. If you're a national student, everything is going to plan. You are talking with them, you're getting the prices, you are starting to finalize all the details about how much it's going to cost you to get your pilot certificate. And this is where the budget comes in, because if you want to become a professional pilot, you've got to get as much training as you can to help you get that first job. So the normal route, if you want to become a professional pilot, is when you get to flight school, you start with your private pilot certificate. Everybody's got to start there. Once you've got your private pilot certificate, then you've got some hour building to do between when you finish and when you are able to get your commercial pilot certificate. So what most people do is during that hour building is they do their instrument rating. Normally you need about 40-50 hours of hour building anyway, and an instrument rating is going to take you about 40 hours. So you basically may as well kill two birds with one stone, pay a little bit extra and get your instrument rating. So you do your private, you get your instrument rating, and then you do all your commercial training. Once you've got your private, your instrument rating and your commercial certificate, you are now able to technically go and fly for a living. Problem is, you've got about 150 hours. Nobody is going to touch you with 150 hours. So one of the things that you can do in the US is you can become a flying instructor. And I know everybody's like, oh, somebody with 200 hours is teaching me how to fly. How do they know what to fly? And yeah, I see both sides of it. I've been through it. The way that I looked at it as a flying instructor was I wasn't teaching people how to fly because I didn't have the personal experience of flying. But what I was doing was teaching them how to operate the aircraft within its limitations, within the rules and regulations of the FAA, within the rules and limitations of the aircraft manufacturer, and basically teaching somebody how to operate the aircraft safely. Once they had got their own pilot certificate, they were then learning to fly. Just like driving a car. You pass your driving test, you can operate the car, you don't know how to drive. As you get more experience, you become a better driver, same with being a pilot. So becoming a flying instructor is a really good option because it allows you to build hours. Just be modest and humble, and remember, you're there to help somebody else achieve their dream, not to crank out hours so you can get out the door with 1,000 hours at the basically expense of other people. So help other people achieve their dream by being a flying instructor, but don't milk them for the money. So private, instrument, commercial, CFI or certified flight instructor, and because you've got your instrument rating, you can also become a CFII, which is a certified flight instructor with an instrument rating. Once you've got that, you are basically the most employable 200-hour pilot that you can be in the country. And this is where the visa comes in, because if you've got a visa that only allows you to train, now that you're done, back you go to your own country. And then you've got to convert your US license into your license of your own country. But if you've got a visa that allows you to work, you can now apply to work as a flying instructor anywhere in the US. Hopefully you can get a job in the school that you're at, but you know, there's only limited places. So avoid that carrot dangle. Yeah, we'll hire you. We hire all of our students. Yeah, BS. There's no way that you can go and hire all your students that you train. Doesn't work like that. So basically the process is private, instrument, commercial, CFI, CFII. Once you've got those, you can now be employable, but you've got to work out how much all that is going to cost. And if you check in the link below, I've written a full article over on the Pilot Teacher blog that shows you what the FAA minimums are for each, but what it typically takes most students to get each certificate. So if you only want to get a private pilot certificate, you can check that blog post out and it will show you what the average is for the US. For everything else, you can go on there and it gives you some kind of guidance as to how much it's going to cost you to get a private, or just a commercial with no instrument rating, or a private with a commercial with an instrument rating, CFI and a CFII all the way through. But you're going to have to use that price comparison tool that you can find in the description below to check with the schools and get exactly how much that school is going to cost to go through all of the certificates that you want to get. Now, this is the important bit, is the budget. You've got to get this as close as you can. And also remember, if you're traveling to the school, it's not in your hometown, you've got to put in money to live, you've got to put in money to eat, you've got to put in money for entertainment, for clothes, all the usual stuff that it's going to cost you. So if you're going to go there and you're going to be at school for 8 months to a year, how are you going to survive for that year without a job? Or are you going to get a part-time job? International students, you can't get a part-time job flipping burgers whilst you're flying. You can only work in the field in which you are training, so you can only work in aviation. So that's something to bear in mind. If you're an international student, you can't work whilst you're training. National students, do whatever you want. You can go flip burgers, drive Uber, drive Domino's, whatever you want. But you need some budget to cover not only your flight training, but your accommodation, your food, your expenses, all the other stuff. So make sure you put that into there too. Once you've got your budget sorted out, you've got to find a way to get hold of that green stuff, because yeah, it's tough. You're going to be up, you know, 60, 70, 80, 90, $100,000. And yeah, you've got to figure out a way of how you're going to get that money into your bank account. So go through and look at all the options. There's so many options depending on which country you live in. I'm not going to go through and bore you as how to get financing, but you've got to get the financing for your budget plus a bit of a buffer zone too, because if you get halfway through your training and your money runs out, then you've wasted, you know, 20, 30 grand and you've got nothing. So make sure your budget is accurate. Make sure you leave enough in for unforeseen, and then you should be good. So at this point, you should have basically picked out what kind of certificates you want to get, have your flight school nailed in, you got your visa application hopefully well on its way. Hopefully you get your visa application received back with the visa in it. Once you've got all that, you know which flight school you're going to go to. Now you've got to sort out things like, when am I going to start my flight training? Does the school have intake dates like a school? You know, you've got semesters, that kind of stuff. Or is it more of a one-on-one, you just start whenever you want and you go at your own pace? So this is something you need to speak to the school about. So basically you need to decide on when your start date is going to be and then work your way back from that. So let's say your start date is 8 months from now or a year from now, whatever. Get that start date, work your way backwards, because if you're moving away from home for flight training, you've got to tie up all your loose ends from where you currently are. So do you have to give notice to your job? Do you have to, if you're leaving the country, do you have to sort out your bank accounts, let them know you're leaving, let the government know you're leaving, all that kind of stuff. Make sure everything that you leave behind is good to go. So when you leave for flight school, everything is good in your home country, hometown, wherever. So make sure you tie up all your loose ends. Once you've got your intake date, you obviously need to book your flights or book your travel or figure out your travel. You're driving from, you know, New York to California. Is your car going to make it? That kind of stuff. Because as pilots, as pilot students, we're all poor peasants, and usually the cars that we have generally can't get you there. So, you know, how are you going to get there? Are you going to be taking a car with a U-Haul? Are you going to be flying? If you're flying, you need to make sure that the school knows that you're coming in for those dates and has got somebody to pick you up, and you've got accommodation reserved, because if you get there at 10 o'clock at night and there's nobody to pick you up and there's nowhere to stay, yeah, it's going to be stressful. So get your arrival to the school sorted out as the next step, so they know and you know exactly when you're starting. Okay, so just a quick recap. You've got to decide which kind of pilot certificate you are going to get. Then you're going to get your medical before you start doing any flight training, so that you know that you're healthy enough to fly. Then you've got to look into which country you're going to train at, and if you are, you're going to need to look at your visa situation and also any medical insurance. Like the US, you definitely do not want to get to the US without any medical insurance. You have an incident or an accident and your bills are going to be through the roof. And a lot of schools even demand that you have medical insurance of a certain level. So make sure you are up to speed with all that. Next, you've narrowed down your flight school. You know exactly which flight school you're going to go to. You now know which kind of certificates and ratings you're going to get. And you've now prepared your budget so that you know exactly what you are going to be expecting to pay. Once you've got your budget, now you've got to try and find the cash. So once you've found the cash, you've got all that sorted out, you've got it in your bank account, you are pretty much good to go. Last thing, get enrolled at the school, know the school, make sure the school knows when you're starting, and when you know when you're starting, vice versa. You've got accommodation lined up, you've got any transport pickups lined up, and pretty much now you are ready to get on that plane or start your journey and head to flight school. I can still remember it now, and that was, oh gosh, 20 years ago. I can still remember standing in the lineup for security, and I got my whole world in basically 2 suitcases and 2 backpacks. And yeah, it was kind of a nervous feeling at the time, but it was also fun because I was going off to do something that I'd always wanted to do. So becoming a pilot is a fantastic career, but if you don't do these planning steps right, it could cost you and you may not even make it to finishing your training. So basically, follow these steps, decide what kind of pilot you want to be, try and find the cash to do it. If it means a big loan, yeah, you got to do it. My loan's in the UK with my parents because there's no way a bank was going to lend me, 60 billion bucks worth of money and then leave the country. So my loan's in the UK, so yeah, I have to send money back every month. But hey, sacrifice I have to make every month, but look at where I am, on a beach. It's beautiful. So if you want to get into one of these, landing in places like one of this and get paid for it, follow these steps and you too can become a full-time professional helicopter pilot once you've left flight school.